Okay, welcome back to another Rest Eat Move podcast, and we are finally back in the studio. We got the duo in the house. So much better than doing the Zoom. I get to see you. Your technology's better, and then you're gonna go back up north. So I got the big fella in the house. We're gonna talk about the power of food. Last week we talked about this missing nutrient, omegas. I think that's a really interesting podcast everyone should listen to. A couple announcements. We have our new food bar coming out hopefully in the next week or so. Whenever it arrives, we'll launch it. And it kind of ties into our podcast today about food. You're going to see this bar come out, and it's not going to be about how many grams of protein or what are the nutrient panels. I don't even think we even cared. We said, what food can we put in this bar that tastes good, that you can take on the go, and get you from point A to point B. And I think that's a good lesson that you can take away in today's podcast, that we're making things too isolated and specific versus thinking about just the power of food. So welcome back to the studio. As we were talking, getting ready, we're going to talk about the power of food and specifically how this leads to the pH and why that's important. And we'll go in several different directions. But launch us on this podcast today. Where do you want the listener to go over the next 45 minutes?
Well, prepping before we got on this today, you're kind of sharing with all the stuff that's out there. There's a lot of noise out there, and it always will be. So, and that can be a good thing, but also can be.
I think you should grow a beard and just stay up north and act like you've never seen the internet.
Sometimes I'm like, come on, it's just regurgitating stuff over and over. We did a podcast a couple weeks ago about yin and yang, and in our world today, it's way too much yang. Things are moving fast, and not enough yin, which is again more. So that's
cooling and slow.
Yeah, and that's the noise out there, and it's very confusing. You know, people I run into, we get emails, calls, and what do you think about this, and what do you think about that? And sometimes I'm like, well, let's go back to the basics, and that's what I thought today. Let's talk about sustainable, realistic ways to keep you thriving. I just did my blood work today, and it was funny. I was talking to the phlebotomist, and she's going, "Man, you're getting a lot of tests here today." And I said, "Yeah, because I want to know my homocysteine, I want to know my, GFR, I want to know all these things." And we had a little conversation, testosterone, and she said, "You believe everybody needs these?" I said, "Yeah, it gives you a baseline, and then you can really, it doesn't lie." So again, back to food. Food is medicine. The other thing I want you to start out with is really think about nutrition 101. And when you think about nutrition, which is when you eat foods, the body kind of uses it for repair and healing and everything else. But we know food's more than just nutrition. It's love and social. But then if you don't use the nutrients, then you eliminate them. And then if your body doesn't know how to eliminate them, then you store them. That creates toxicity. So I think we don't even talk about that enough. Like, hey, take this, take that. And the reality is that how does it actually work? So number one is, what nutrients are we missing? And number two, what nutrients are we not absorbing?
So I was speaking to kids yesterday from ages 6 to 18, 4 different sessions.
You're tired.
Some underprivileged, some have privilege, all different spectrums. And they're all kids. They're all the same. They're very curious until about age 13 or 14. They're all asking questions. One kid said that his favorite food was ribeye, just crazy things. But I was teaching him about nutrition. And so what do you teach a 6-year-old? And at the same time, you got a 12-year-old there's such a spectrum. And I told him that, I grew up with this health freak that drove a Frito-Lay truck. How many like chips? Oh, we love chips. And I said, I love Funyuns. But I said, what is nutrition? And their answer was to be healthy. They're just saying, which is true. But I was telling them nutrition is to be nourished. And so I said, I like chips, but I don't eat chips to be nourished. And I think but that's still food. But nutrition is to be nourished. And so nutrition 101 is, what are you deficient in? What are you missing? And there's a lot of noise right now. I think we might as well jump right into it. Is there's a lot of noise that we're deficient and not getting enough protein.
Well, we'll step back for just a second. So how many calories do we consume in the United States today on average?
Adults, about 4,000.
So about 4,000. And we're more undernourished than ever before.
Yeah.
So we're eating more, but we're undernourished.
Right, and that's what I was trying to explain, because I like chips. I like ice cream, but I'm not eating those things. I'm eating those things for the love, maybe the social, maybe I'm bored, the satisfaction, the dopamine. Like, there's different rewards, and I think especially when you're teaching kids, you start to realize this other noise that we were just talking about. You never would teach a kid to eat that way. But we're also teaching these kids that they should, have rewards, and, every snack should be tasting good. So maybe we're going in that direction too much, but you would never take it to the extreme and say, hey, kid, get a scale out. I'm going to make sure that you're getting 15 grams of protein in the morning. Are you measuring it? Did you eat like, you would never teach that. It's more like intuition. And so that's something that really stood out, is nourishing is what nutrition is.
Well, and I think too, if you're teaching, first thing I want to talk about is energy and calories, because not all calories are created equal. Still to this day, many people believe that all calories are created equal. They're not. So back to nourishment. So your chips are calories, but those chips don't equal an apple. They might
if I was starving, I'm not going to die because I got chips.
Right.
But it's not.
But when we were in the Grand Canyon, we did rim to rim, and we got stuck there years ago as a big story. But everybody's doing these Pringles. I'm going to take Pringles with me in the rim to rim because it has salt and, we lose electrolytes. But I was talking to the gang because that was my role. Like, I helped educate them. They're like, oh, no, these work great. I'm not going to be in the Grand Canyon with a Pringle. Now, if I'm going to take food, I'm going to take something that's going to nourish me. But that was true. Everybody's taking Pringles, and because they're, dehydrated chips, and it was the salt, and they satisfied you.
I was like,
no.
I was thinking about, you're stuck in the Grand Canyon and some varmint wants those Pringles. It's like when I took the Whoppers in the tent and the bears are.
No, you wanted the combos.
Pizza combos.
Pizza combos that were supposed to not have food that needs to be taking up a pole.
Any scent, these bears are going to attack you. I got these pizza combos.
What are you eating in the tent? And you're like, it's like 11 o'clock at night, and it smells like pizza.
You can smell them from a mile
pizza
away.
combos, and we got bears outside of our tent anyway.
So let's take this to the pH, but before we do that, so you're saying nutrition 101, we're lacking nutrients, or we're missing nutrients, or we're not absorbing nutrients. And there's a lot of noise that we need to consume more protein. And so I don't disagree that people are not consuming the right nutrients in their 4,000 calories, and they're eating too many. But where did we get to this state that it's such an obsession that you need more protein? If I do a presentation, 9 times out of 10, someone says something about, I need to get more protein. How do I get more protein? Or, you had a lady in the office the other day in her mid-80s. She's all worried about, I need more protein. Or I get a phone call and say, do you have anything you sell that's going to help me get more protein? It's just an obsession.
Well, again, back to the 89-year-old that I'm working with, and she's going through this plan run by a hospital, and they're telling her she needs to eat more protein, and she's eating plenty. And I'm like, oh my gosh, let's just step back here. And she was really nervous and then she has a kidney issue. So now you're going to tell somebody that has a kidney problem to eat excessive amount of protein. We're just not connecting all the dots. Like, how does the body be healthy?
But how did we get there? How did these doctors get so fascinated with people? Like, let's just take bariatrics. When someone has their bariatric surgery, that's all they do. How do I get enough grams of protein?
Well, you said it best a long time ago. You have 3 macronutrients. You have carbohydrates, you have proteins, and fats. And if you take one of those macronutrients out of the diet, you'll have a macro problem. They're all essential. But I still believe the top of the mountain, everybody still believes, is protein. I mean, fat with a keto is a big deal, but carbohydrates used to be the big deal in the 80s. I'm going to eat a high carb diet, no fat. Well, it gets all about the balance, but it really gets back to the source of the quality of each of those macronutrients. And when you're doing that, and we're doing it in a pretty balanced way, now we're covering the deficiencies or the nourishment that people are needing.
One of my stances, let's just say you take a sedentary or somewhat sedentary person that's maybe overweight and eating the 4,000 calorie typical U.S. diet that's not very quality, and you start to focus them in and the calories decrease, okay? And then you're focusing on them getting lean protein in some fashions. Is there a false positive that happens there and then creates this belief system that was a miracle? I mean, is that happening?
It's really hard to eat super high quality foods and getting 4,000 calories in your diet. I mean, it's almost impossible. So if you have some broccoli and some chicken and a potato, you're looking at 400 or 500 calories for a pretty large, volume of food. You go to a fast food place, you got 1,500 calories in a second. So, or we're drinking our calories. You
Sure.
see them everywhere. I'm going to the coffee place and I'm just drinking coffee. Well, come on, all the stuff in it. So that's what happens instantly is they now will decrease. And again, it's the quality, the body looking at those things better, cell, pH, source, all that stuff starts to change. So yeah, they're going to lose weight probably very, very quickly.
If I was going to compete in a physique show or a bodybuilding show or whatever you want to call it, or I'm just trying to get as ripped as possible, and all I did was reduce carbohydrates and increase protein, what would happen to my body? What would the appearance do?
Well, that's what I was taught forever. In my first bodybuilding contest, you got to carb deplete. So
And how do you do that?
You carb load.
And so what's that look like?
So as you deplete as you get into a show. You're coming down, you're going down into it, and
typical day.
Everybody tells you, you got to eat a ton of protein.
And
so
what would that look like back then?
Well, I was doing casein shakes, milk solids in a thing. I had bad skin.
And today that would be whey protein.
It would be whey protein. So I was consuming about 200 grams of protein a day.
200 grams of protein.
Yep. And my skin was a mess, but I was bulking up.
And what kind of carbs were you getting in your body then? And now you're unique in a way that you were kind of maybe more, but let's just say the typical, someone you're competing against, what's their carbs look like?
Oh, they're just eating anything and everything, But as they get closer to a show, let's say the last 12, 14 weeks, they're really ratcheting it down. They're not eating fruit anymore.
No fruit.
No fruit. Some vegetables.
Maybe a couple asparagus.
No grains. Nothing. They're just cutting that right down.
No potatoes.
Yep. So now they're carb depleting.
But their protein has been high the whole time.
Always been high.
Yeah.
Super high. Very acidic. Eyes are bugging out. Can't sleep anymore. Heart rate's higher.
But you're looking like a solid stone.
Yeah. Yeah. So then for most of them, and they still do this today, but then they'll carb load. So now they're going to because they're going to get really flat. If you're just doing protein, because you're shedding the water, and then you carb load, and then it makes you kind of get full.
So what's happening?
So it's a fine line when they go in, and so I never did that. I was like, I'm just going to eat the same oatmeal, the same chicken,
just cleaner.
Same cleaner. I'm going to do the whole thing for the whole time. So I'm not like out of here, 3 or 4 days post show, man, I just missed my timing. I looked great a week later. What? You've been training for a long time to get ready for this. So I thought a long time ago, like, I'm not going to do any of that. I'm not going to take fruit out of my diet. I'm not going to take oatmeal out of my diet to carb deplete.
So you learn that in a roundabout way, not necessarily about health, but like you are trying to appearance-wise look a certain way without sacrificing your health.
So before we go down this path too far, because we'll get back to what we want to talk about, but I think this will help the listeners a little bit. But my first show, I got up to 232 pounds. I was taught that my natural body weight was right around 175. and then I got to bulk up, and then you cut down. So that's how casein shakes, all this protein powder. Did it for a year.
You're a dumpster.
I got a dumpster, and then I did a CPK test, blood test, and my enzyme levels were through the roof. I was overtraining. My muscles were tearing. I was just a mess. My skin was bad. But then I went and competed, and I lost 62 pounds. And I competed at basically 170, and I was ripped, but I was miserable. And I thought to myself, so my next contest, I got bulked up again, but not as much. And I'm driving home from Grand Rapids, and I'm like, what am I doing? And I started learning more about nutrition. I started studying it more, and I'm like, I'm not doing that ever again. I'm going to stay my same body weight, and I'm going to slowly go down. And I would lose about 10 pounds to get ready for a show, maybe 12. And then my last 4 or 5 shows, I looked better than ever. Was I as big as I was before? No. Was I doing 200 grams of protein? No. But I had plenty of muscle.
You're not wrapping your knees and squatting and
no,
checking these boxes.
We did that. But again, back to, can you get lean by eating good carbohydrates and healthy proteins and healthy fats? The answer is absolutely yes. So that's the noise we're facing.
So what are we doing today? So you hear an 89-year-old, a 55-year-old, someone coming out of college, everyone's saying, I need to get more protein. I have these young athletes, and they're told by the bigger, faster, stronger, their coaches, their trainers, you need to get more protein. You need a creatine, peptides, branched chain aminos, whey protein. And I heard something the other day that, like, when you have that flexibility at that age, let's just say from age 15 to 40, you got a pretty good flexibility. Or maybe let's just say 35. And so you can throw anything you want into it.
Well, we talk about that over 8, you can do anything you want.
You don't even have to you don't have to sleep, and so you learn these habits across our society. Everyone's being told you need more protein. And then let's just say somebody hasn't really been paying attention. They're in their 50s and they're like, I got to change. And they go to a trainer that's 35 years old, and the trainer says, yeah, you need to get on whey protein.
Or an 89-year-old.
Or an 89-year-old. And next thing you know, it's all over social media. Next thing you know, there's books written about it. There's doctors talking about it. And at the end of the day, one of the things that we see continuously is all the other symptomatic problems of this mismanaged balancing of your pH. And so let's go into that of why does overconsuming protein lead to a more acidic body, and why is that important for our health to balance that pH?
Well, when you think about just some basic things, so next thing we would talk about nutrients you're missing, what are you not absorbing, but we talk about gut health. Big topic today. Everybody's talking about gut health. So the gut is a garden. And so when the garden gets healthy, then everything starts to roll. Your health begins in the gut. But if your pH, again, back to, potential hydrogen, you have an alkaline side, and then you have an acid side, and balance is basically in the 7. So we'll just use numbers to help you balance. So extremely alkaline would be 14, extremely acid would be 1, balance would be 7. And the human body will do everything in its power to keep you in balance, or we would all die.
It has to. We can't survive.
We can't survive. We would die 30 to 40 minutes later.
Think of a goldfish, the water gets pH, floats to the top.
Doesn't last long. No different than human beings. And we have all these checks and balances. And the biggest check and balance we have is breath. So when we do our slow diaphragmatic breathing, it changes the pH. We move more on the alkaline side. If you're trying to hyperventilate, you can move over to the acid side. So breath is a big deal. Number 2 is minerals. They're called buffering minerals. So when my pH gets out of balance, stress, too much alcohol, too much protein, the list goes on, my body becomes more acidic. Now my body uses minerals to balance me.
So I also like to look at it as this is when absorption plummets.
Starts to plummet because now you're depleting.
You're not holding on to.
Correct. So you might be taking all the calcium in the world. You're just taking calcium. But your body, or magnesium, everybody's talking about magnesium today because it's a mineral laxation.
Or creatine, or protein,
whatever.
Or anything.
And that's making the body more acidic, which is now flushing these nutrients to help buffer that pH. So this is why pH is a big deal. And as you make your body more alkaline, you're generally going to be healthy. You're going to have a healthier garden.
So let's make a couple clarities that I think are really important. acid or an acidified body equals inflammation.
Inflammation.
And you could even go cancer, disease, illness.
Well, again,
Compromised immune system.
people say all the time, cancer doesn't live in a alkaline environment. I don't go there. What I go there is you're trying to create a better environment for the body to thrive.
Or eliminate or clean or...
Correct. Better garden.
So acid equals inflammation. And the second thing...
Let's go there for just a second. And acid is the root, is what you said is inflammation. And inflammation is the root cause of basically every disease known to the human race. So if you're trying to thrive, and I want a six-pack, I want to whatever, but why would I want to change my opportunity to be thriving from a health standpoint just to move over to the acid side? Because everything speeds up. We did a whole podcast on the yin and the yang. That's the yang. Everything's speeding up. And amino acids, protein, back to that is an amino acid. So it's more acid. So that's why proteins, especially animal, and again, both you and I eat animal protein, is going to be more acidic.
So an inflammation leads to poor gut health.
For sure.
So acid equals poor gut health. I think this is very important to talk about, and it will start to make sense here. And so the two, I would say, most important things when you're thinking about nutrition 101 going into the 200s and the 300s of education is we really want to eat to keep inflammation at bay, to manage inflammation.
Everybody's taking anti-inflammatories.
And then we also now know that our gut health really is the most important part of our body. It leads to good brain health. It leads to good energy.
Well, and again, we've talked a lot about this. Dr. Phil Nirenberger and Debbie were staying with, Paul and I, your mom. And, we talk a lot about the nervous system. Got to get the nervous system in balance. That's the stress piece. Once that starts getting in balance, because if that's out of balance, it's very hard to have a healthy gut. But once that gets in balance, now we start, and this is how I work with, this is how you work. I'm like, hey, the gut is everything. How do we get the gut healthy? So now that will help them when they're having questions about protein, they'll start to understand and recognize that, I need to maybe think about this a little differently.
Okay.
Because you can't just say, hey, no, I don't want you. No, you got to tell the story.
So that now this is where I'm going. So if acid equals inflammation, inflammation equals poor gut health, over-consuming protein is acid.
Yeah, amino acids, correct.
Okay, so
so we got to clarify this too. The more protein you put in the body, the more the kidneys have to do. They have to work harder. That's why when we talked about the yin and the yang, fruit is really easy on the body because fruit does not have protein. So it's really easy for the body to break down. So you're giving the kidneys a little bit of rest. So that's why when you constantly are putting protein in the body all the time, you're really putting the stress on the GFR, which is glomerular filtration rate. That's a kidney function. And this is what I've seen in the last 10 years. I see such low glomerular filtration rate. So if you're getting your blood test next time, make sure you get your GFR, and you want to know exactly that number. I mean, dialysis clinics are popping up like never before.
So here's my opinion. I don't really have any science, but if you're between the ages of 20 and 45, you can somewhat hack and get away with just consuming the most amount of protein you possibly can put in the body. Now there's symptoms, and the key is, do those symptoms bother us enough to pay attention?
But my thing was, why do you need excessive amounts?
Well, hold on. So I'm not saying that's a good thing, but I'm saying, why is it such a popular thing? Because it's a huge range, 20 to 45 to maybe 50, depending on your genetics and your. But what we've seen over and over again, when that age hits, when that decline starts to happen, when you need those kidneys to be functioning, when you need that gut to be a garden, when you need that inflammation to be at bay, now we have a laundry list of other
Well, go
symptoms.
back to some of the symptoms. Your eyes start to get a little buggy. You're having trouble sleeping. Your skin is like sandpaper. Your breath smells like acetone. So this is what I see.
Your nervous system, you're anxious.
You're anxious.
You're
Yep.
stressed.
Yep. So
Fight or flight.
back to the yang, speeding everything up. But man, I look good. So I think we can have it all, but we have to educate before we, because it's hard when you're speaking in front of a group and you're throwing that out without having to set it up. It's difficult to have that conversation. Now, if they ask questions, tell me what a protein is.
Okay, so all those things, buggy, sleep, but then the lack of sleep leads to poor hormones. And then poor hormones lead to, I'm on a high protein diet, but my hormones aren't very good. I look pretty good, but my hormones aren't very good, so I don't feel very good. So now I'm going to take synthetic hormones.
Well, again, you and I were talking about this, but we're going to start doing long form podcasts, and I'm going to do some of this stuff and go into the weeds, but you're exactly right. Why does everybody think they need hormone replacement therapy?
Yeah, so I turned 38 this month, and a large portion of younger and younger people are taking hormonal replacement therapy. Women, men, the parents, the kids, like it's all coming together. And I think one of the things that again, the point of this podcast is the power of food. Once you start manipulating a macronutrient, and it always comes down to specificity. What's the goal? If your goal is to win Mr. Olympia,
I agree.
It's a whole different ballgame.
Overdo it.
You're going to want your skin to be so red and tight.
Extremes. Go crazy.
But if you're not, we're going to start playing this game where you're playing whack-a-mole, but it's just going to show up in different ways. And so if you can handle not being able to sleep 8 hours because you can, or if you don't mind that you're overstressed or over-anxious, or you're taking medications for those things and you're not willing to change, one of the things that we now know is our gut leads to good mental health. And I can't tell you the people my age that are struggling with anxiety, they have no idea that the connection between all those supplements that they're taking. Man, I take whey protein and branched chains and creatine, men and women. I take multivitamins. I take this. I take that. But I'm just so anxious. So I'm now going to have to take a anxiety medication or depression medication. And I'm not saying there's never a case for it, but we're not connecting the dots.
Correct.
And so the power of food in the connection to pH, we now know that we need to keep that pH balanced. And we eat protein. You need protein, but it's a balance. And that's why you can't cut out a macronutrient. In the case of many people, it's carbohydrates without having a macro problem.
Well, again, you said this a while back, but potatoes to Prozac. What is that book all about?
It's not getting much PR right now.
Right?
Yeah, I think it was 1996.
Yeah, but go back in time.
Potatoes are Prozac.
Potatoes are Prozac. So
starchy carbohydrates are very calming and cooling.
And so back to serotonin. Where's serotonin made? Made in the gut. 90% of your serotonin is made in the gut.
I think it's a perfect time. Think about it's pool time. I got my pool shirt on, no diving.
Yeah.
If you want your pool to be more acidic because it kills things. You want it crystal clear. Nobody likes algae, pond scum, animals, varmints. So we went swimming yesterday with the kids, and the neighbor, the Waltas, are unbelievable. And Linda doesn't want to go in the pool because there's a couple dead chipmunks. One, there's plenty of stuff to kill whatever things could possibly be in there. It's a huge body of water. But you put those things in a pool to kill things. Same thing when you think of your gut. Think of that as your pool, except you actually want algae to grow. You want good bacteria. You want these all this stuff we were talking about, gut health, the flora, the garden.
Microbiome,
Microbiome. You do not want this thing to look like a chlorine pool. And that's what's happening is all the antibiotics, anti-everything, the hand sanitizers, all the dead foods. And next thing you know, we all have to take now a probiotic or prebiotic or symbiotic, or now there's these prebiotics that you take. So it's just becoming
or
crazy.
Or Nexium or Prilosec or, all the stuff that goes with that.
And so that's, to me, the craziest thing is we know this when it comes to a pool. You have too much chlorine, you burn your suit. You have not enough chlorine, algae grows. And you want that with a pool. But you want the flip of that when it comes to your pH. You actually want it to be more of the algae growing, the alkalinity, because when everything's too acidic, then it kills it. And I think that's one of the things with protein is it has the least likely chance to, create like bacteria. And so it's easy to produce it. It's easy to process it. It's easy to put it in bags that last forever because it's not going to harm you because it's growing bacteria. Some of the healthiest foods, like an apple or whole food, it only has a shelf life of a couple
But
days.
back to okay, so we can touch base on this, but some of the stuff you're talking about, that's dead foods. That's sitting on a shelf, and it has whether it's protein powder.
Think of that as your chlorine pool.
That's a dead food, right? It's just sitting there forever.
And now you're going to have to take something else to make up for it. So pH is a big deal. Specifically, too much protein is going to create that. I thought you were talking about some good things with the bugged eyes, but what are some body signs of people that are over-consuming protein? What are some body signs?
Well, for me personally, it first starts showing up in my skin.
Red skin.
I have
inflammatory skin.
Yeah, your
rashes.
Body, right, you're getting psoriasis and eczema and things like that. People have dandruff. It's that kind of stuff. That's a big one that shows up right away. Inflammation starts to creak. My joints are bothering me more than ever. I could also have some swelling in my joints. That's the stuff that shows up. And then internally, you're going to see kidney challenges and liver challenges, BUN for liver and GFR for kidneys. So those are the things.
Isn't your
hair is a big deal?
Isn't your biggest one though sleep or lack of rest? And
well, again, back
relaxing?
To the yang, you're going to go. Everything's going to start speeding up. So I remember my first bodybuilding contest. My heart rate started going up. I wasn't sleeping good. I was just consuming way too much stuff. I was overtraining, but I was definitely doing too much protein. So we don't want to have people feel like we don't want them to consume protein, but we're just seeing everything as massive amounts of protein, more better. No, you're over-consuming. You're changing the gut. You're changing your pH, and you're not thriving anymore. Again, back to am I thriving or just surviving? And people are trying to thrive. That's why they're doing it. But to me, there's a lot of misinformation out there.
So if you can't relax and you're consuming all these things, why don't people notice that? Why don't they notice these other symptoms of playing with your pH too much?
Because they don't connect it. They don't know that. So again, back to the yang, it speeds things up. It's more warming. So that's the challenge. There's no connection there.
Can you be ripped? So I think a lot of people think of inflammation as swelling. So like red and soft. But can you be ripped and have inflammation?
Oh, for sure. Oh, yeah.
And in some aspects, it actually makes kind of look like maybe a little bit more ripped.
You're speeding everything up. Heart rate goes up. Brain waves go up. People, it's all that stuff. Your sympathetic nervous system's going up. And you think about what's going on today. So again, yeah, can you get leaner? Oh, absolutely.
You probably be more mentally sharp
And if you're cutting a lot of things out, you're cutting calories out of your diet. So if I'm eating lots of protein, I'm not that hungry and I'm cutting calories out of my diet. So there's a lot of things that start to happen. But again, you're going to have more joint inflammation. You're not going to sleep. Your brain, you can't relax. So that's what we're facing right now. There's a lot of problems going on with over excessive amounts of protein or just imbalance, just being stupid about some of these things.
And I think acid reflux is a great example of how the pH really does work in the body. I'll say this on air. We've never not had someone not get off their acid reflux medication if that's a goal. It's one of the easiest medications. It's one of the easiest symptoms to cover up.
It's easy to fix. And again, back to you got to teach them this stuff. Back to gout. What is gout? What is acid reflux? What is all the digestive?
What's uric acid? Yeah.
What is it? I mean, uric acid is a test that everybody needs to get. We changed that on our Know Your Numbers because I was seeing such high uric acid levels and nobody's talking about it. I mean, if your uric acid's creeping over 6, you got a problem. So again, when we're talking about excessive amounts of things, I'm seeing too much alcohol consumption, too much protein consumption, uric acid's going up. So the body doesn't always, it's a slow drip, but it's starting to show up.
Okay, so I think we hit our points on why you don't want to really go into just more protein is healthier. Now we can, short periods of time, you can handle it. And you probably will have a positive effect. You look ripped, you'll get leaner, you might have more energy, you might have more mental clarity. It actually might be simpler and easier and something to follow. long term, though, you start cutting out things that nourish the body. Let's just even call it micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants. One of the things I was teaching these kids the other day is I showed them an apple. I would say 60% of these kids between 6 and 10 knew that oxygen made that apple oxidize. It was amazing that they know that information.
I mean, if you bit into it, it turns color.
Yeah, it oxidizes. But where do you get antioxidants? Because that's what we should be finding at every time we can get an antioxidant, we should put it in the body because we know we're oxidizing.
The oxygen is so important.
We're aging. But where are most antioxidants coming from? Carbohydrates. But Matt, I'm cutting out carbohydrates. I don't eat fruit. Well, then you're cutting out antioxidants, and you're gonna age faster. You might look lean, short period of time. You might have more mental clarity, might have more energy, but you're not sleeping. So now your brain is gonna be under a tremendous amount of risk, and now you're gonna have more of the oxidation.
Well, you said at the beginning, would you teach this to a 6-year-old?
You would never feed a T-bone steak to a 6-year-old first thing in the morning.
And you can't eat apples or bananas anymore.
No fruit.
Yeah, so again, it's just that's the point of this podcast today is we're trying to let people understand what's behind the curtain a little bit. That I don't have to get up in the morning and have 40 grams of chicken.
Doesn't even sound good.
Well, again,
or put the beef liver in the blender.
Yeah, beef liver in the blender. Come on, I mean, so that's the questions we're starting to get that I've never seen before.
All right, so a couple things, and then we could go even deeper right here. But I want to take away. Okay, how do we get the right amount of protein, but also make the body have the right pH? We'll go into those steps here in a second. I think a number two numbers, and you just got your blood checked. If you're curious, am I eating too much protein? Am I too acidic? Do I have too much inflammation? Just a reminder, homocysteine, it's a blood test, measures oxidation. That's a great indicator of if you're consuming too much protein.
I can't tell you how high, and it's a risk factor for heart disease.
Risk factor for heart disease. It's an amino acid. That's what it's testing. Homocysteine is amino acid.
And the number one way to lower homocysteine is folate, which is greens.
Carbohydrates.
And antioxidants.
And then the other one is to measure inflammation, which is high sensitive CRP, C-reactive protein. Again, that's going to tell you if you're saying, I don't know if Matt or Chris is right here. Get those tests. If those tests are in order,
they'll call me out like, hey, I go, give me those tests. And then I get those tests, and they're like, now their ears, they're all ears. Okay, what am I doing here? I'm like, well, you can't be doing
homocysteine is in my opinion, the silent killer. Nobody knows what their number is, and they could be walking around looking so physically healthy.
Here's my blood test today, and I have to ask, Dr. Cooper is my doctor, and he's great, and no problem. But when I go into the lab,
they have to verify again.
They have to get clearance that I want these, and if they don't clear it, then I have to pay these fees. And I'm like, okay, whatever. But you're not going to get that test unless you really dig in about that.
There's some resistance.
But how would you know?
You wouldn't.
It's a preventative thing, and there's no medications for it. So again, those are two big tests. And the other one, as we mentioned earlier, is glomerular filtration rate, GFR. You want to know that number.
That's your kidneys.
And that will tell you if you're consuming too much excessive amount of protein or alcohol. The list goes
on. All right, so let's give them some steps. How do I get enough protein but keep my body pH, the power of food, in balance?
If I eat live foods, real food, it's not a problem. So all your macronutrients have protein in them except for fruit. So if I get up in the morning, which I had this morning, I had my oatmeal on the run, real deal oats, had some walnuts in it, I got protein. Cacao nibs, dark frozen cherries, but the combination of everything is about 15 to 20 grams for breakfast already.
So you got proteins, you got carbs, you got healthy fats, but also you got yang foods. It's
I got
balance.
Foods high in magnesium. I got stuff for my gut health. It's all of the above.
And for someone that says, well, that's just not enough protein to begin with, why would you recommend someone not to start their day with animal protein?
Because you're putting stress in the body right out the get-go. So the point of it is, during a day, if we looked at, like, if you just had a list of nutrients you're trying to put in the body, I'm already behind. With all excessive fasting we're doing today, we're already behind. If I'm doing lots of protein, but I'm not doing any carbohydrates or healthy fats or whatever. So the key is, as we said at the very beginning, what nutrients are you missing? And I'm starting to miss, how am I going to catch up? Where am I getting my B vitamins from? Where am I getting some of these things that lower my homocysteine from? So to me, I eat protein from plants. I eat protein from animal, but I'm consistently
and you'll
doing
eat eggs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I have eggs all the time.
Yeah.
So to me, but I don't have to start my day with 30, 40 grams of protein a day.
Yeah, you're not meal prepping.
The average person, if you're saying the average person, how many grams do I need a day again, you and I don't count, but we're aware, but maybe a half to 1 gram, 1 gram would be the max. If I weigh 80 pounds, 180 grams would be my max.
That's a lot, yeah.
But I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to mess with my kidneys.
And if you do that, it's not through supplementation.
It's not through supplementation. It's eating chicken. It's eating, buffalo. It's eating spirulina chlorella. It's eating, vegetables and grains. It's coming from food.
Okay.
No protein powders. None of that's going in the body.
So we're going to start with live whole foods.
Whole foods.
That's what we started, the power of food.
And if you're eating a handful of meals a day and you're consuming, let's just say you're consuming 20 grams per meal, there it is. I got it. We have a smoothie blend. I made a smoothie yesterday.
Flax, chia, hemp.
Yeah. And so my smoothie blend, I had about 20 grams in my smoothie. Okay, boom, I got it. So it's not hard to do if I'm eating live foods.
Real food. Okay. So let's just say you're starting to eat more live foods, but still you feel like you're having a deficit of protein. What's another way to look? What's the meal people could really improve? I think breakfast, you have to eat breakfast, but I think you can overconsume protein too quickly if you start going to more of this carnivore, I got to get my animal protein.
Again, I don't want to mess up my gut. I want to have my gut thrive. So why do I want to dump all it? I want to make sure I'm eating live foods during the day, good for my gut health, good for my brain.
You're slowly revving up.
Building my body. I have enough protein. It's called nitrogen balance, enough protein to build and repair. That's what I make sure I need. But if I'm eating real food, and I don't really, I don't really eat a lot of animal protein until dinner. I just don't do it. So I'm trying to give my body a little more rest before that. But I do eat animal protein almost every day. Some days I don't, but most days I do. So, but again, back to the question, am I eating really high quality carbohydrates? Am I eating high quality fats? And am I eating high quality proteins? And don't let anyone dominate the others. They're all important. That's where you just don't hear this much. Like, I'm going to have a whole podcast on carbohydrates coming up. I'm going to talk about what they are, how they work, the list, where you get them from. It's the same kind of thought.
All right. So let's move into, to lunch and dinner and snacks. Like, what are some ways to get protein in those meals?
So I went golfing yesterday. And I was gone pretty much all day. So I get up, I do my oatmeal in the morning, I do my wheatgrass, I did cod liver oil, I did all that stuff, my superfoods, did my oatmeal on the run, ate that at about 9:30. And then I'm always going to take a piece of fruit. Apples travel well. And I have some walnuts with that.
Sometimes you do Brazil nuts.
Sometimes a Brazil nut. Sometimes I'll do.
But you're usually mixing those
macadamia
with the fruit.
nuts. Yeah, mixing it up. So I'm having a piece of fruit, and then I'm doing that. And then I had a On Target Living food bar, and then got home. And last night we had chicken, asparagus, and potatoes.
And you're sprinkling spirulina and chlorella throughout the
Spirulina and chlorella, I'm probably doing about 40.
And if you're listening to
tablets
this,
a
if you
day.
know anyone that's like so gun-ho on you need more protein and they're not consuming spirulina and chlorella, let's just say we're not going to convince everybody that they need to decrease their protein. But if you're not using spirulina and chlorella throughout the day as your protein, you're undereducated because it's the highest source of protein by weight.
Yeah, so again,
it's the most absorbable.
It's good for your gut health and all that stuff. It's very alkalizing. So
nucleic acid.
Yeah, it's an alkalizing base of protein. So, but that's a typical day. Like today, like I have leftover chicken. I have leftovers, and then tonight we'll have another. But during the day, yeah, it's going to be a piece of fruit. It's going to be a bar. It's going to be something like that. But you don't have to overdo it.
And how's your strength and fitness at how are you 67? How old
I'll
are
be
you?
67. You're pushing me right now. It's interesting. I do a 12-week plan, and right now my goal is, I think I'm hitting the golf ball as far as I've ever hit it in a long time, and I'm working on that.
Not ever. In a long time.
In a long time, yeah, not ever, but a long time. Yeah, no, I don't hit it like I used to. But pull-ups, I did 8 pull-ups the other day, and I'll be water skiing this coming weekend. But no, I feel pretty strong right now.
So I think the challenge we'll throw out there is we gotta back up and realize that we're given tactics today. There's a lot of science out there, but I think the thing that we forget in habits are beliefs. And I think we're not very open to the belief of maybe we don't need more protein. And so there's a lot of people listening. Maybe you got into this. Maybe you saw some positives. You created these beliefs, and our beliefs are what lead us to action. And I think the thing we challenge is we got to be open to the belief that we're going to live to 90 to 100. And there's some things, some effects that happen if we try to cut out and hack and manipulate.
Well, and again, I really like that thought there, because we talk a lot about that, like, number one, how long do you think you're going to live? How long do you want to live? What do you want it to look like? But I think thriving is really, like in my generation now, people want to thrive.
Well, think about this. Let's just say you're going to live to 100. I do believe a lot of people are going to live to 100. I think a lot of people are going to not live their lifespan that they should either. I think it's a very extreme.
Oh, there's no doubt.
It's a gap. We call it the aging gap.
Yep.
But let's just say you live to 100 and you want to thrive. Most of the information right now that's being spewed and noise are people between the ages of 30 and 50, closer to 45, young, low 40s. You're going to live to 100. You don't see a lot of people podcasting at 89 years old talking, well, I don't really need 1 gram of body weight of protein because I want to protect my brain. I want to have good digestion. And so we got to realize that if we're going to live to 100, there's 50 other years outside of that window that we're getting most of our information. And I think what wisdom is more experience that we sometimes forget about. And so we see a lot of people in different ages, and we tend to see people over the age of 50 that have done all these things for so long, and then all of a sudden something broke.
Well, and I think with all the stuff going on, Olympics is coming right now, and people are doing stuff, but I think over time, a lot of them wake up. Like I can really, people are getting caught for, all sorts of steroids right now in Major League Baseball,
boxing,
fighting. It's all out there. People are just casually taking hormone
replacement. Mike Tyson, I think he can take whatever he wants for his fight.
Yeah, so it's all that stuff, but at the same time, you can get that thriving without going to that
power
level.
Of food.
Yeah. And I think that's what, one of my first bodybuilding contests, it was an era of taking drugs. And I just like, hey, what could happen without taking drugs?
And the drugs are so much better now.
Yeah. And then you look at Lance Armstrong, the whole list goes on. I'm like, can you really compete? Well, they all believe that you can't. So they're all basically doing, but what if we just step back and say, okay, how can we all thrive and have that performance, but also age the way we want to age? And I think that's where people like, oh, I was doing this. I wish I wouldn't have done this. Well, let's move forward and say, okay.
So I think a great lesson, we talked about these young kids. You wouldn't teach these young kids to eat this way.
Wouldn't. And
you wouldn't teach an 89-year-old to eat this way.
I felt so bad for her.
And so then you got to say, man, the body is pretty adaptable. It's amazing that it can survive in the environment that we sometimes put it in, and even somewhat thrive in the environment that we put it in.
Well, it's also giving you all these symptoms and signals that things are not right.
Yeah, sleep's bad, anxiety's high, we're stressed
Let's
out.
Just stop for a second
Skin's
and listen.
Poor,
yes.
We need more probiotics. So as I wrap this up, I think you'll come out with your long-form on
You
proteins.
can't wait. I know you're excited about
I
that.
can't wait to put the kids to bed and listen to 2 hours. No, I think it will be great. But I wrote this down before we began, and I think I hit those notes. Do you have anything you want to share before I wrap this up?
No, I think, again, back to if you like our podcast, share it with people. But we're trying to create a lifestyle that people can basically pivot. And when you're so focused on this is the only way, then it's not going to work.
And you can overconsume protein. We
Yes.
see it every day.
You can overconsume carbohydrates. You can overconsume fats. You can overconsume water.
You can overconsume superfoods.
But we just want to create this, just step back for a second and say, hey, really, do I really need that much? We're going to give you parameters. Shoot us an email. We're happy to answer any of these questions. But that's the noise that I've been seeing, is some of these numbers are now showing up, and it's telling you that you're definitely consuming too much protein.
So I wrote this. You can't hack the body long term. But there's podcasts, there's social media, there's Reels, there's TikTok. Just got to look for a second and realize that if you really peek behind the curtains, this is a short-term hack. It will change tomorrow. It's trendy, whatever. And there's a philosophy that easy is never long-term good. It's never the best thing that you can do for the result that you want. And if you look at it and you say wide and shallow. So wide and shallow. What is wide and shallow? Wide and shallow is, I would say, where we are in our information gathering. Wide and shallow. So it catches our attention. It's short. It covers, there's a lot of different things that it can cover, whether it's hormones or protein or weightlifting or nutrition, but it's shallow, meaning you're not going to be able to do it long term, versus narrow and deep. You want to really go deep into what a protein does for the body? Great, do it. And when you think about habits, though, you want to go narrow and deep so that they can last forever. You've been competing for, well, you haven't competed in a while, but you competed over the last 40 years. And it's the same thing happening today. But you learned along the way, like, okay, this isn't sustainable. How many of those people that you competed with at 66 years old have the fitness and the health that someone would assume they have at 66?
Well, I again, people go back in time, what they did. Maybe they look back and maybe they did. But again, I wasn't looking at that. I was looking at competing against myself.
But what I'm saying is those folks, if you saw them at 30 years old,
I get it. Yeah,
they look like peak physical health.
Oh, for sure.
And many of them probably couldn't even walk up a flight of stairs.
Yeah, it's just, again, what kind of lifestyle. I mean, you see this in a lot of professional sports where, at this 25 to 30 range, they're, but then as time goes on, they didn't maintain the same type of regimen or the lifestyle, or maybe their lifestyle wasn't very good back then. My goal was always to, how do I learn and try to improve? And the stuff I was doing when I did my first bodybuilding show, I realized that's not sustainable. And number two, it's not healthy. And so I look good on stage, but I'm like, this is not what I want to do.
So that's the takeaway for me, and that's always what I go back on. Are there times where you got to clean it up and refocus? Absolutely. Yeah. But I think the key is how do we go narrow and deep in our lifestyle, creating these habits? And when you look at it that way and you say, okay, macronutrients 101. We all now know there's 3, and there's micronutrients too that we sometimes just poo-poo.
But if we're doing the macronutrients, you're taking care of the micronutrients.
Unless you cut out a
Correct.
Macronutrient.
Right.
And I think that's what we forget
Yes.
about. Can you manipulate a drink, a bar to look good nutritionally? Absolutely. But what we've found is once you do that over and over and over again, now we've lost the power of food.
One last thing here before we get out. But like I had a client the other day, and he wanted to know, should he be taking, this will be a long form podcast, but he wanted to know, should he be taking hormone replacement therapy? And I said, well, let's just step back. Are you doing these basic things? Sleep, number one. What are you doing for stress? All that kind of stuff. Are you taking an omega-3 fat? No. Okay, that's the raw material. Are you taking selenium and zinc? Where do I get that from? Brazil nuts, pumpkin seeds. Are you doing strength training? I mean, we've covered, it was no, 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 and no. And the first question was, should I do hormone replacement therapy?
And then you say, well, are you willing? Are you willing to do those things?
And he was very willing.
So then we got a first step.
But he was just, everybody's talking about it. Doctor's talking about it. Comes in, his testosterone level's low. There's none of the sleep. There's no list here. And I think that's the goal of this podcast, or our podcast, is we're trying to give people a playbook to help them navigate some of this stuff and ask better questions and be curious and all the stuff that comes with it.
And so again, I think it's very simple. It's not easy. I think in some aspects, eating a lot of protein is somewhat easy because it's so like understandable. Like everyone knows that if all I have to eat is a piece of steak, we can understand that. But it is pretty simple to eat macronutrients in whole foods. And in our opinion, you don't have to count. You can be aware, but you don't have to count. You just start to eat more food and then listen to the body. Is your skin good? Then you're probably doing some things good. Is your digestion good? Are you going to the bathroom? Do you feel like too much, too little? Are you paying attention to that? And that's, to me, the power of food. And specifically, remember, acid equals inflammation, and inflammation leads to poor gut health. And so if we overconsume protein, at some point, it's going to break. And that's what we're seeing. And so we can't wait to bring you these long-form podcasts. New bars coming out. We're always here. info@ontargetliving.com. And we'll see you again next time.